different panelists with us today from Haines, Bethel, and Metlakatla, and they all have different setups and approaches to composting in their communities. So I'm just gonna hand it over to them to introduce themselves. Cindy, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Zuluaga Jimenez. I am located in Haines, Alaska, and I am the compost program manager for the Chocat Valley Compost Center.
Thanks, Cindy. Gatgyeda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Gatgyeda Haayk, and I'm from Metlakatla, and I am the community garden champion at the Metlakatla Indian Community Sittendoyitgum Geltup Community Garden.
And then Julie and Bethel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie, and I don't really run any kind of a community program, but I just have a large gardening operation, and we've been doing a lot of composting, and we've got kind of a unique situation out here. And I often share compost with people in the community that want it. And we often have neighbors contribute to our compost pile, but I'm operating a very small scale program.
Well, you're very humble.
All right. Hey, can everyone see that?
Yes. Looks
All right,
good.
perfect.
Thank you.
So I guess one of the questions that we get is, why did we start a commercial compost center? And as you can see, there's a good amount of reasons. There is no integrated waste management in Haines or the Chocat Valley, so that equals to some pretty high disposal fees. We have two ways. We have a community waste solution, so that is a private landfill, and they do a haul and pickup option. But the thing is that most of the community actually is not in the pickup line. So what happens is that they end up dropping it off. Also, the price is quite expensive. It's about 43 cents per pound. Or you also have prepaid bags, 30-gallon prepaid bags at $12.50. So actually it ends up being about $600 or so per family per year. We do have a wonderful recycling facility, a nonprofit, Haines Friends of Recycling, and they really help kind of maintain that waste stream in Haines in terms of recyclables. Illegal dumping and burning are commonplace. We actually have a very beautiful lookout that is called Picture Point, but it traditionally has been called Garbage Point. And that is because it was one of the main centers. And to this day, literally, there is still dumping happening there. Throughout the years, we have had negative wildlife interactions, peaking around 2020 when 50 bears were killed in the Chocat Valley. The number ranges from 30 to somewhere around 60 because not everything was reported. We actually had two community compostings that we outgrew. We had Jenny, who did the community composting here in Haines for a while, and I took over for her in 2019. So we had different operations, and both of those were outgrown by the community. This also meant that the community had lots of exposure of the benefits to composting, so it kind of really helped kind of get everyone on track with it. And then we had a series of great luck. The Haayk Watershed Council allocated 2 acres of their property for a composting center. That was followed by zoning that was compatible with the site and regulations that allowed the site to go through. The initial market research that I conducted was very favorable, and generous funding from sponsors was always a key. So the vision that we had was to drastically alter the waste stream in the Chocat Valley. As I mentioned, we do not have an integrated waste system. Breaking down of 100% of the waste stream, 40% of that is compostable, and 30% is recyclable. So that's reducing approximately 70% of the waste stream going into our landfill. We have those partnerships that I mentioned. We all came together and realized that this is the best way to really stream that streamline that waste stream and keep that landfill going as long as we possibly can. So the operations for the Chocat Valley Compost Center, there is a bay system, so it's 6 bays. I'll show you pictures in a little bit. We will have 3 active bays operating under ASP, the aerated static piles, and then 3 feedstock and curing bays. Our feedstocks that we're going to be using are fish scraps. So this is fishery waste. It's already a waste product, and lumber pipe products such as sawdust and wood chips. We'll also have, so that it kind of bulks up the nitrogen, and then we have sawdust, chips, and kelp that will do the carbon inputs. The tests that we have done range carbon to nitrogen ratio of 30:1. So that is within the guidelines. You want 20 to 40 approximately, and a pH that's quite neutral, 7.3. And then we plan to add to that feedstock food scraps in 2025, so next year. We are planning on doing 2 cycles, a spring and a fall cycle, with 3 phases. It comes about to 3 months each cycle. Per cycle, we expect to do somewhere between 5 and 40 cubic yards. So that could be anywhere from 2,000 pounds to 10,000 pounds of compost coming out, depending on the, on the moisture content of that compost. The PFRP that we're following is the traditional PFRP, which is a process to reduce pathogens, and that basically asks you to maintain your piles anywhere from 135 to 170 for at least 3 days, and that's to ensure that all pathogens are completely taken care of. They tend to average, fish waste tends to run pretty hot, so it will probably average around 150 from all my trials. We'll be following the zero waste hierarchy and testing every batch after curing through soil test consultants in Washington, which is an STA certified lab. We'll also be doing bioassays and germination tests, as you can see there. Everything's growing pretty well. This is the food waste, zero waste hierarchy that I mentioned. It's just kind of as best standard practices for pretty much any compost operation. And it begins with preventing. So you really want to kind of reach out to your community and start teaching them about why compost is important. You want to feed people. So a lot of food can be diverted to feeding people. You want to feed livestock after that. And here you can see my duck, who really loves taking that role on. You can also do anaerobic digestion to produce different kinds of gases that can be used for power. And then finally, you want to use your composting methods, followed by disposal at a landfill or incinerator. So that's kind of the hierarchy of what your waste should percolate through. I mentioned ASP, and I just wanted to make sure everyone was kind of aware of that type of composting. It's pretty simple. It's really, you're running these pipes through the middle of the piles and aerating them. So that really kind of increases the rate of the composting, so things break down way faster. And it also really, really helps with mitigating any odors that you might have. So, that's always just really important. We'll be setting ours. Their blowers go through these big, they're supposed to be for the inflatable houses, bouncy houses. And it's about every 30 minutes, it'll come on for 1 minute. So it's been a progression. Lots of planning. I have to say thank you for the solid waste working group that started planning a lot of this in 2017. Takshnak Watershed Council began a big fundraising program. Operations started being planned in 2021. And just last year, the construction finally broke ground. So you can see it is a planning process of a few years. We are pending a few things. We are waiting for a perimeter wildlife fence to be erected, which is going to reduce any attractants for bears or moose. And then we hope to start operations this spring of 2024 with compost available at the end of this year. So here is the 2D rendition of the compost center as it was started. That's 2021. 2023, we broke ground in June of 2023. And all the siding has now gone up. There's actually one more updated picture of that, but I just couldn't find it on my phone. But you can see the siding is up. The bays will be lined with reinforced plastic to kind of be able to just wash off. And then I have some suggestions that I was just thinking of that would be really helpful for anyone that's thinking of starting a community compost in your area, and that's really to do your market research. So that's just really finding out where your waste stream looks like and where it's going, and have a business plan, find out who your consumers are going to be. Community-wide education with hands-on activities is always a proven method of getting people excited about compost. Verifying all regulations and zoning is going to really save you headaches down the line. And then depending on what your community is, you can consider a variety of services. Here in Haines, we did 3 varieties of services coming down to ultimately a commercial composting center for the community. And then pursuing a variety of funding sources, and this includes, private-public partnerships, grants, and hopefully partnering with your local governments. So we've had some challenges, and that is mostly the survey of plat lines has delayed fence construction. So luckily, we always take into account that every project is going to be delayed for at least 6 months. So we are still technically on schedule for opening in spring of 2024. One of the exciting outcomes is to extend the life of that current landfill for at least 15 years with the diversion of 70% of that landfill waste. This trend introduces as well to savings to community members. When they go to the landfill, they have way less weight that they'll be throwing away, equals a reduced fee at the end. Reduced wildlife interactions. I do not believe anyone wants to see another 2020 year. It's also a nod to the circular economy and boosting local economies, commercial composting facilities. Haines Rental Recycling is also opening up a new center, and then the end product of a valuable soil amendment equals food security for the valley. Savings to farmers, they're not shipping in these amendments or soils since they'll have that available locally. Increasing food security, and making sure you're maintaining your soil health. And the Institute for Local Self-Reliance has this wonderful graphic on how composting battles climate crisis. And you can see there that through those 4 steps between reducing waste outcomes and emissions, enhancing that soil quality, sequestering carbon through the soil, and building your community resilience. It's just a win-win situation for any community to consider. I put these standard practices for composting facilities if anyone is curious on looking up codes. And finally, I just want to say thank you for our supportive community and our generous grantors. Without it, we would not be at this stage. And that is it for my presentation.
Thanks, Cindy. Someone, or I can't see the question now, but I think at some point Emily asked where you got all this composting knowledge from. Did you?
Oh yeah, that's
go to-
actually, thank you. So I actually grew up on a farm that did on-farm composting, and that was a really great introduction from the beginning since I had hands-on since quite young. And then when I was in undergrad, I went into biology and kind of really started looking at how the soil behaves, and have managed a variety of community gardens throughout the years, and have worked on 3 different restaurants that do large garden to farm to table, so farm to table setups where we kind of maintained a cyclical system of food scraps and waste going through. And then finally, when I moved to Haines, I ran the community composting project here for 2 years before partnering with Tuxnook Watershed Council and going for the big for the big center.
Nice. Oh, they're lucky to have you. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Julie, did you get your presentation to be able to share?
I think so.
Okay, awesome.
Oh,
So if anyone has questions for Cindy right now, feel free to ask while it's fresh in your mind, or later. It's good too.
is that showing?
I don't see. So Philip asked Cindy, are you able to share the plans for your center?
Yeah, for sure. Our executive director, Derek, was the one that drew him up. Luckily, he was a contractor and knows very well on how to build up blueprints. So I am happy to share. Just send me an email and I can share that with everyone. I'll put my email in the chat.
So Julie, do you have the your pictures open already before you hit the share button?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Was I not supposed to?
No, that's what you do. And what do you, when you click that green share button, what are you seeing?
Well, I see mine on my screen right now. I don't see anybody. I see your little picture in the front. Huh. Let me quit preview for just a minute and go back. I've never had this kind of a problem before.
There's always something new.
Well, I used to teach over Zoom all the time.
Okay.
I
You know
guess
what
my
you're doing, right. Okay.
or something. Huh.
Good. Well, how about this? Do you want to email it to me, and then while we're getting that set up, Gatgyeda, would you be able to just talk for a couple minutes about what you're doing in Metlakatla? Sorry to put you on the spot. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. You're
Good
great.
afternoon, everybody. I'm Gatgyeda Haayk, and I work at the Metlakatla Indian Community Sittendoit Gumgeltsup Community Garden. I'm the community garden champion. I've been working there for about 7 years, 8 years now. And we are in the process of opening up it's a community-wide program, but it's not officially a community-wide program. I'm in the process of developing it. I started the compost program about 5, 6 years ago, because when I started at the community garden, all they had was peat moss in all the raised beds, and I was ambitious and like planted all these seeds, and they turned out terrible and small and tasted terrible. And so I went to my boss and was like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I grow food? And she said, you need to amend the soil. So I started composting, and within my own home, I composted with my kids. So I kind of took that as a learning lesson, and like, how do I really want to take this as a community-wide approach? So I started with just one thing, and that was the pumpkins after Halloween. Every Halloween, I started just bring me your pumpkins. And now it's just like a well-known thing that I do every year. And I kind of just took baby steps like that and started approaching all the businesses in the area, our local markets and coffee shops, and started intaking all their food scraps. But it became food waste heavy. So then I tried to reach out to the community for egg cartons and shredded paper, and I tried wood chips, but when you do wood chips, we have a lot of carvers in the community, and I got a big pile of cedar chips in my compost pile one year, and I made most of the word goes around my community by Facebook, so I made a Facebook post and tried to not be offending in any way, just keep it separate, not in the general compost pile. So now it's hard for me to get wood chips, but that was a learning lesson. Just be very specific and like designated spots, because when I started, I didn't have a designated spot at the community garden, so it kind of shifted and moved and grew throughout the years. Like first, it was just this big pile with pallets, just makeshift together because the community garden didn't have any funds. So then I became very ambitious because I needed, for me to grow on the scale that I wanted to grow at the community garden, I really needed a lot more compost. And then we also have our waste disposal is a landfill. And driving past it just hurts my soul. So trying to make a positive impact on there as well, and trying to repurpose whatever we can at the community garden to alleviate that burden on the landfill and make a difference at the community garden. I slowly started just posting around the community garden or around the community, like very specific, like 4-item things, just to keep it simple. Because when I opened it up community wide, because I was like, oh, everybody's gonna know like what you do with compost, what to give, and I got things like car filters and all of these things that I would never assume would be in a compost pile. So that really got me started on heavy community education and getting the kids involved too. So now I have a partnership with the Ned Island School District. We're now going to have compost trash cans in both of the schools. The kitchen staff is awesome and gives me their food scraps. Most of the businesses give me the shredded paper now, so it just took a lot of time. And then now this year, with the APA grant, we are going to be doing a lot more community education to really, because I thought when I first started, I didn't have any plans, and then now that I'm like really starting to see like scale, like what kind of composting facility, what could I really do? Because it's going to be a lot of food waste. You know, if I open it up community wide, there's about 1,200, 1,300 people here. That's a lot of food waste. And if I want to even capture 50% of the community's food waste and compostable items, that's a large surface area. So finally, we were able to establish a compost home. But over the time, like I makeshift pallets, tires. I just have a big pile where I turn by hand. And I also use fish totes. I just drilled a bunch of holes in them for drainage and air exposure. And I try to keep one tote empty, and whenever I turn it into another tote. And it's time consuming, which I'm very thankful for this EPA grant, because now I can use a John Deere and not have to do it by hand, but it's what I gotta do.
Well, thank you. It can be fun getting in there and when you have a big group, but not when you're by yourself.
I don't mind it. Composting is like my passion, so I
Yeah.
love it. It's just, and then figuring out your right recipe. I have to, at first it was so food heavy that I had to really get creative. I also go out to the beach. I know you can't do that all over Alaska, and some places it's illegal to do, but I go and I get seaweed. I don't take a lot, just enough to help amend my compost pile when I'm turning it and to mediate funk, because it does get pretty smelly sometimes, especially in the summer months, but um, it does help. And just getting creative, and then you have to be very specific if you're going community wide, because not everybody's going to get it. Um, it's still new to a lot of people. Like, I had somebody come up and like, why are you doing this system from like the medieval times? And I'm like, but it works. And then it's also making a difference, and it's helping the environment. And in long term, it's gonna help not only the community garden, but our local food growers, and have food security for our Alaska. So
Yeah, definitely hard to wrap your head around if that's like not what you're used to. Emily asked what was wrong with cedar.
so cedar has a oil in it that it doesn't decompose. It takes like a really, really long time. And so that being in your compost pile, it won't disintegrate, it won't decompose. And then it just takes a lot longer of a process.
And then Jonathan had a question for Cindy. I'm not sure. It looks like maybe you addressed that, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything else.
So we'll have the composting facility open for drop-offs by the community on Wednesdays. And then when the fishery gives us a call when they're processing, we'll swing by with lots of fish totes and and haul that. So we'll be kind of depending on when they're breaking everything down. And the fishery was actually the first person that did the community compost. So they do an on-site composting, but are looking to move away from that. So they used to compost it on site, and then they're looking to move away and composting it off-site.
Well, and yeah, sorry for anyone who's confused. The question was just about collecting fish waste from the fishery and whose responsibility it was to do that. All right. Well, if no one else has any other questions at this moment, I think we have everything figured out for Cindy's presentation. So I will share that. I don't know. And then
Thanks, Iva.
yeah,
This
just
just has
me
my,
into advance.
yeah, this just has my contact info on the bottom. So if people are looking through the recording, it's there. I have a small nursery operation, and my partner is a commercial fisherman. And so we kind of combine our efforts to make the whole project work. So you can move to the next. And this is, I just wanted to put this on the map. We are pretty rural, like a lot of the state, and it became very apparent quickly that if we wanted to have any kind of a gardening, growing operation, that we had to start producing all of our own soil, because to fly it out or to barge it up, it was either not timely for us or way, way too expensive. And we had a lot of the stuff available for composting, so why not dive in and do it? So next one. It's just is like a timeline of how we got started and how long we've been doing it. And I don't have a lot of scientific information like Cindy's did. We have just been doing trial and error the whole time and making mistakes, and the next year trying something different. we got started with the NRCS EQIP program in 2010, and they really turned us on to testing our soil and trying to figure out what kind of nutrients we're missing. And that's really where we started honing in our whole compost operation, was when we were starting to get a little bit more serious about growing. So next slide. This just is to show you the scale of what I do out here in Bethel. I've got mostly a flower and vegetable business. You can skip through the next couple of slides. It's mostly just showing like the scale of our growing operation. We grow things in ground and in planters. We've got 3 high tunnels, and then we've got a lot of outdoor growing area. And we rotate our crops quite a bit. And all of the raised beds that you see in the pictures have pretty much been filled with our homemade compost. You can move to the next one. I think the next one just shows some of the outdoor beds that we've got. Okay, and then here we get into the compost. So we're really working to create our own soil from compost. It's not just a soil additive. The ingredients that we use for our project comes from food scraps mainly. We use food scraps from our own home. Our neighbors will drop stuff off sometimes. We also run a bed and breakfast, so we've got a lot of food scraps from them. My partner has a dog team, and we're constantly strawing the dog boxes and scooping up manure. I did have a chicken operation until a mink wiped me out, but I've got 2 neighbors that supply me with plenty of straw and manure for that. We take all of the fish guts and the blood water from washing things and put it on our compost piles. We'll pull up some of the old garden debris. We rake leaves from the yard to layer them in. Occasionally we do sawdust. And gosh, probably about 8 years ago, we got some worms from upriver and added them to our compost pile. And we only had to do it for 2 years, and now we have worms all over the place. So I think that just the warmth of the compost piles and then some of the raised beds have provided enough insulation for them to do their thing and survive through the cold winters. Down in the kind of the lower middle portion of the slide here is a study that was done through the USDA and NRCS and the Fairbanks Soil and Water Conservation District. And it was all about the feasibility of using dog manure as part of your compost operation. And we were pretty concerned with it because we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to introduce harmful bacteria. And you'll see later on when I show you the layout of the compost bins, it's a lengthy process to try to neutralize the bacteria, but we feel like it's successful. I don't have any kind of scientific research to back it up, except for the fact that we've never been sick. And it seems to work well. The dog team has decreased quite a bit in size. Yeah, and so we're putting much less dog waste onto our compost piles. Okay, so our composting action kind of begins sometimes in commercial and homemade tumblers. Back on the left picture, back behind this green rotating composter, are a bunch of old water tanks. And we used to take our compost and dump it. Sometimes they'd be in plastic bags, which we have learned to kind of avoid that now, but we would take the bags out of our compost buckets and put them in 3 metal tanks where they would kind of turn to mush. They would freeze up in the winter time, and then when the sun would beat down on it in the spring, they would mush up into pretty stinky, mushy compost. And then we would shovel them out, separate them out if there were any plastic bags, and throw them into our compost bins. Somebody was giving away that rotating green composter in front of those tanks. So we kind of switched to that for a while. And then the picture on the right was just an old tank that we had around that we cut into the side of it, and we were trying to roll it on the ground back and forth after we'd fill it with food. And it was painted black just so that we could get the heat benefit from it. But that's kind of how it starts. Sometimes we have too much for the bins and it goes directly into the compost piles. But a lot of times getting a head start on it is really helpful. So you can move to the next slide.
Okay, Emily raised her hand. You had a
Yeah, Julie, I'm dying to know. Because it sounds like you have all these greens ingredients. How do you source your browns? And I mean, I can see in the next photo, there's a lot of trees there, but sort of picture Bethel as a place without trees. But yeah, how do you source your browns?
We do a lot. We do sawdust, we do leaves. We'll pull out the plants from the garden area. Sometimes it seems like it's not balanced as well, but we don't do anything scientific. We don't measure anything out to make sure that we've got the right amounts. It's kind of just a homegrown process. And what we've discovered is if we've got something that feels like it's not ready to go into our garden beds, we just throw it into the other compost bin. And so here's where I'll show you like how the process works. We have 3 large rimmed enclosures that were just recycled roofing tin. They range in 8 to 10 feet in diameter, and the one that Aiden is standing in is the 3-foot high one, and the shortest one that we have is just 30 inches high. And really the reason for that is that's what was available, so we just recycled it and used it. And so we're on a 3-year rotation. It takes a while for our compost to break down, but that's also because of the manure that we put in it. We add our ingredients to 1 active pile a year while the other 2 piles are kind of resting, breaking down, settling. And while they're doing that, we do go in and turn them with a pitchfork. And but we don't actively continue to add anything to the 2 resting piles. And then I think the next picture will show it. You can move to the next slide. Oh, this was a shredded paper experiment that we did. I used to be a teacher at the school district, so we acquired large volumes of school district shredded paper, and it worked for a while. We discovered if we didn't have the right balance, our soil got super heavy and really gummy. So we tried to cut back on it. And then we discovered that they were starting to shred things like envelopes that had the plastic windows in them. And we'd find credit card pieces in it. And so we just decided not worth it, not going there. So we kind of finished that project off, and we only add our own paper that we know if it's got the soy-based inks on it and things like that. We will sometimes throw some of that in, but really we've kind of stepped back from that. It was a great experiment. They really appreciated us taking it, but now it just goes for fire starter. So the next slide. Once we decide that a compost pile is ready after it's been through the 3-year cycle, we dig it out with a shovel, and it goes through like a screening process because and people miss things like the stickers off of the fruits and veggies, and sometimes the corn cobs and things, and we get avocado pits, stuff that doesn't break down so easily. So we screen through our soil, and the screen actually sits on top of those black action packers. And we shovel it, and we just use our hands and kind of push it through. And I love just feeling it. Just getting in the dirt is a kind of a fun experience. And then once the totes are filled, we just top them off, and they sit for another year, and the sun beating down on them continues to cook it. And we originally put them in the action packers because it made it a lot easier for transporting it around the property, so that we would have a small enough amount that we could tip it into a raised bed as we were getting ready to add to some of the existing beds. But it turned out to be really nice because the heat in it was still pretty powerful. And I think that's what helped us kind of feel confident that all of the dog waste and chicken manure and all was thoroughly broken down. And If that's just it, I mean, we have done really well. The compost has helped us to grow a variety of fruits and vegetables on the farm, and I think we wouldn't be half as far along as we are if we didn't have the composting operation in place.
Beautiful presentation. Thank you, Julie. It kind of blew my mind when I learned that you could compost dog manure.
Yeah, there are some people, we actually have the folks from the community garden will come over because they've been trying to establish a composting system in the community garden. It's so far away from where everybody lives, though, it's hard for people to grab their buckets and make sure that they take them over when they're full. But they came over to visit, and a couple of them were kind of freaked out about the dog manure thing. So we keep that study very close at hand so that we can share with them that we're really following the protocol that was laid out by the NRCS program. But yeah, I actually want to take some of Cindy's. I love that the drawing and the plans for your new composting facility. That is amazing. I think if our community had something like that, they might be a little bit more active in getting their compost over there.
Geraldine asks, does it matter what the dog's diet is?
It could potentially, but our dogs eat fish and moose, and they do get a little bit of high protein fat kibble. So it's a pretty organic diet that they're eating. I actually don't know the answer to that, though. I mean, I don't know if somebody who has their own dog and their own like just a house dog eating like regular packaged dog food, if you could do the same thing or not. Great question.
So Julie, do you have like, do you ever still import any soil, or does this meet all the needs that you have?
Because I start my seeds from seedlings for the vegetable portion of my business, I do import BX mix because our compost is heavy and it holds so much moisture that sometimes will drown the seeds, or it won't allow the roots to push through the soil as easily. So whenever I'm filling I have a soil blocker, and then I do have a couple of the plastic beds and things that we put the seedlings in. And I do put the BX mix in that. But then when it gets transplanted into something bigger, it goes right into our compost.
Julie, this is Mardell here in Haines, and I have an operation exactly the same as yours with a little bit of variation. We do a 3-year cold composting. I don't have it in the circular bins. We have a bobcat, and so I have 3 piles, and we turn it with the bobcat. And it works very well. But this is an interesting thing that I've just started doing, and I'm wondering if you have tested yours, because I've started using the microbiometer, and I've tested my compost. I've been using it for 20 years. I have awesome crops. We grow almost all of our own food, but it's testing extremely low in microbes. It just doesn't make sense. I'm wondering if you've tested yours.
I think Julie might be having some internet issues.
I did. I just crashed on me again. I heard Mardell's first talk. Right when she started to talk about the bobcat, I crashed.
Okay. I'm saying that was one of the differences of our system from yours is that we are able to use the bobcat to turn it. So we don't have to do it by hand, and it's not in the roofing bins the way you have it.
Oh.
But and that makes it just easier, less work. But we have had to we learned through experience that you have to have something to push against. And so we built this structure that, oh my goodness, it's being held up with cables and everything, so that we can use the bobcat to get in there and lift the pile and turn it, because you know that it gets to be a lot of stuff that you're turning.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, just last year we got a small Kubota tractor that has the ditch digger on the back of it, and we're gonna use that to start turning the compost because it takes a lot of muscle to get in there, and I usually have woofers come help me do that.
And, oh, we lost her.
And I was actually, so Mardell, I was curious about your microbiometer, because like Julie, I don't I am lazy. But yeah, I'm curious like what you think of that tool and how it's helped you.
Well, I'm at the very beginning, and this is why I wanted to find out from Julie if she's tested hers. I was very surprised when I found such low micro activity. And so what I do with mine, rather than using totes as Julie does, I put mine in big, huge, those big bags that you see on road construction projects. So in the fall, my third pile, I sift it all and put it in there. And that's where it spends the winter because I need it in the spring, of course. And so at first I thought, oh, it's just because it's been sitting all that time. So then I tried actually activating it with more moisture and taking it from the active pile. It was a little bit better, but it was amazing how low it was. So I think I trust the microbiometer. I don't know. I'm at the beginning of this journey, and so I found it fascinating that Julie is doing pretty much exactly the same and is having similar results. I'm not dissatisfied with my results. I'm just trying to be a little bit more scientific and not with much success. Well, success with growing, but not success in understanding what's happening.
Right. Has anybody else used one of those? Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
Okay, so no, I haven't used the microbiometer, but my question for Mardell was, what kind of temperatures are you seeing, and how hot is it getting? If you get high temperatures, you can start to eliminate some of that biology that we want to see. So, are you monitoring temperature?
Not monitoring it very carefully. There are some of the piles, I'm not scientific about this. And so now we have started adding rabbit the last few years. And I'm noticing that my pile is getting a little hotter, but only in the very middle that it gets hot. And I have always said that my pile, the reason it takes 3 years to turn is because it's not a hot pile. It tends to be cool. But that's good information, and that I haven't really thought about, that maybe that's what's going on is that the inside is getting hot, hotter now that I'm adding rabbit stuff.
Yeah, and I know if probably a lot of you have seen Jody Anderson's composting presentation. She talks a lot about temperatures and when to check temperatures. And if you go into our Grow webinar archives, and there's a bunch of, you can watch her programs on YouTube if you search for them. But yeah, that's a good point, Jonathan, monitoring the temperature.
Tell me the name of that person again, Julie.
I'll put it in the chat. It's Jody Anderson.
Oh, Jody.
She's like our Alaska compost queen, unofficially.
I do have a question for the panel, if that's okay, for Cindy, Julie, and Gatgyeda. Just about collections and what you guys are thinking in the future when you're picking up from businesses, residents. Do you plan on charging? Do you have cooperations with your cities and boroughs? And how are you getting the information out there, just interacting with the community and such? And yeah, just want to see what the future has for you.
With community intake, I plan to use buckets and to be able to sustain the program, because right now it's just me as the community garden champion and pursuing funds to develop this program. But long-term sustainability is trying to establish like a really good fee. I don't want to charge too much, and I don't want to undercharge to where it doesn't sustain the program long term. And then also long term is we are gonna approach tribal council with an ordinance for big businesses to give their food waste to either local farmers or the community garden. As far as fees, we haven't really determined that. I'm trying to get more network to see what other businesses and operations, what they charge. And as far as the community goes, we have a sustainability expo every year in the community here, and the community comes and I tell them about how much we've collected in the year, what we've been doing, how they could be a part of this positive impact on our landfill and our food system. And then also just a lot more education opportunities with the school district and at the community garden. I try to do it in the springtime and in the summer and in the fall.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's actually one of the gaps that we see. I see a definite possibility for including a hauler in the operations. So someone that goes around and picks up either compost buckets from households and larger totes from commercial buildings, just because not everyone has the ability for the drop off. But that of course adds like an extra layer of logistical coordination. So I definitely see like in the coming years, hopefully integrating a hauling system into the compost operations. And what we're going to do is we're going to charge $100 for households to be members of the composting center, and then they can drop off their food scraps from there. And when I did the community compost as the hauler, I charge $25 a month for a pickup every week. If Gotcha. If you want to write that down that was 2 years ago. But that seems to kind of be the average. I know in North Carolina there's a hauler that charges $45 a month for haulering, but that's a way bigger operation.
Alrighty, well, if there's no more questions, then I think we'll just wrap it up. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Happy
Thank
composting.
you.